Hey, Steve Mignani here doing the Junkyard Crawl with a 1937 DeSoto S-3. Now, we have to remember, DeSoto, what's that? Well, it was once part of the Chrysler Corporation family, which in 1937 went Imperial, Chrysler, DeSoto, Dodge, Plymouth. But here's the thing, in 1934, DeSoto and Chrysler Corporation and Imperial really went all out with something called airflow styling. The Chrysler Airflow and DeSoto Airflow of 1934 were revolutionary vehicles, and this ain't one of them, but we'll get to that. Now, the Airflow was featured here in the April-May issue of 1973 Special Interest Autos. There it is on the cover right there. And this is the Chrysler Airflow from the back. Now here's the thing about the Airflow. It was the first streamlined car of the 1930s. I mean, this is 1934, not 44. Now if you look at that, the Airflow had very aerodynamic styling, unit body construction, not body on frame, very safe cars, straight 8 in Chrysler and Imperial lands, and DeSoto had a 6 or an 8. But we look here, there's that frame. It's a unit construction car, very unique car. The problem is, in Chrysler land, you could get a conventional car or an Airflow, but at DeSoto, all 1934 DeSotos were Airflows. Sales fell 24%. So what do you do? Well, you backpedal. You go to something called the Airstream, which was basically the DeSoto Airflow, but radically different. Body on frame construction, very old school in terms of not being aerodynamic, but they finally sold, brought DeSoto back from the brink. Crazy how something modern can actually be a detriment. In fact, getting back to this, here are some Airflow prototypes. So we're going to go all out with Airflow styling. We can see right here. Now early on, something called the Trifon, but look at that. Aerodynamic styling was the rule. And these things in 1931, Chrysler was playing with these things. The envelope body, the torpedo tail, aerodynamic styling, all that stuff. This Trifon thing from 1932 still exists. I've seen that. It's at the Walter P. Chrysler Museum. And here it is right here in 1973, when it was only a 41-year-old car. But with that said, this thing still exists. It's the prototype for the Airflow. But again, a lot of people call the Airflow Chrysler's magnificent turkey. And again, the DeSoto particularly suffered because all 1934 DeSotos were Airflows. But that changed in 35. The Airflow and the Airstream sold side by side. And again, the Airstream name was used through 1937 or 36. But 1937, DeSoto forgot all about the Airflow and Airstream and just went back to S3, which is what we have right here. Now this is similar in some ways. It is streamlined. It does have that sort of Dick Tracy car look to it. This is a candy dispenser from the 1930s. It's an old candy container right here. We can see all the letters. It's this thing would have dumped candy out. You would have eaten your candy. But again, Dick Tracy, you know, potato designing, streamlining was all the rage as airplanes became more monocoque design, with aluminum bodies and moving away from fabric, etc. And the auto industry paid attention and they emulated that look. But again, sometimes too much is too much. So with this car here, this is a very basic car in some ways, although it does have influences from the Airflow and the Airstream, rounded fenders. It would have had standalone headlights in pods. And interestingly enough, this would have had 6-volt electricals. The headlights would have been not sealed beams, but a reflector with a 6-volt bulb and a glass lens. This thing right here, which we can see is ready to cause some stitches somewhere, but again, glass right there. And again, you would this set says here right way headlamp. There it is right there, the right way headlamp. And again, these little contours shaped into the back here help to direct the light and turn it into a pattern and make more out of that little tiny 6-volt bulb than it otherwise could have with just a smooth lens. Now, one thing about 1937 DeSotos, they all have the same engine, 228 cubic inch, flathead 6 with 93 horsepower. A decade later, in 1957, of course, DeSoto would have hemispherical combustion chambers on certain engines. But again, in 1937, all DeSotos had the same engine. No V8s or no straight 8s for that matter, I should say. I love these Belden clear spark plug wires. Look at that, you can see the lead inside, a company called Belden. They're still very active, but these are some old school plug wires that somebody added to this thing probably back in the 60s. And notice how the coil is located in the firewall right there, kind of typical stuff for a car of the 30s, goes down to the distributor. And if you're a builder of hot rod engines, you'll always know you never have your plug wires running next to each other like that because you get crossfire. Well, the reality is this 6-volt system doesn't make too much spark. There's not going to be a whole lot of spark jump with this. And beyond that, if your plugs are that bad, you shouldn't be driving your car. Now, something interesting about 1937 is how the hood is a 3-piece design. The outer hood could lift and go up and down like that, but the sides are also removable for service. So you can, these little T-latches right here secure the side panels, and you have this. But again, it's more streamlined in three-piece form seen here. Now this is a DeSoto. This has something called floating power. There's a lot of leaves here, but the motor mounts on this engine are under the chin. Here's the front mount. Look at the bottom of this thing right here, mounts to a cross member. And at the back of the transmission, the other end of the engine is supported. So it kind of can rock. There's a spring under the firewall that keeps it from falling over, so to speak. But floating power was a Chrysler thing to minimize the amount of vibration that got into the chassis. And it was an interesting phenomenon. It would only lasted a few years. It would go away, but floating power was a major thing in Chrysler land at this point in time. Gotta love these DeSoto hubcaps with DeSoto little, it says stamped steel with a chrome face, but DeSoto right there. 16-inch rims, old school tube type tires made of rubber. And again, this cord structure. These were once white walls, the white rubber being more delicate than the black rubber, pretty much going back to nature. This one does have a couple of noteworthy options. A factory spotlight. Yeah, this thing right here. This actually was a factory spotlight. The handle's inside the car. And this is something that you could have bought right from the dealer. It would have been installed at the factory, the spotlight. And these things right here are the knobs for the factory antenna, which would have lived right here, a little radio antenna. And sure enough, radios were absolutely factory installed options starting around 1932, 33 in most American cars. Now there is a radio inside this one, but it's not what you think. The original radio has been harvested. We see the hole. However, we look there, that's an aftermarket radio. It's probably from an old Nash or something. But again, the 3-speed manual transmission on the floor. And no automatics yet in DeSoto land, but something unique, of course. The body is by Briggs, who is a subcontractor to many automotive companies, including Chrysler Corporation. But suicide doors, it's a 4-door, this one here, of course. The back doors open like so. You get in and out. Art Deco styling inside of there. All this fabric, all this cotton, whatever this sort of cotton batting stuff here for the upholstery, the springs, visible to be seen, the 16-inch wheels, and again, a little grab handle at the back right here, this little rope to hang on with, and again, Art Deco styling, windows roll up and down. Now, getting back to the whole thing about the Airstream replacing the Airflow, or selling side by side. This is Automobile, Collectible Automobile magazine here, June 1999, and it says here, 3536 Chrysler DeSoto Airstream rescue vehicles. Yeah, Chrysler Corporation was close to problems, and we can see right here, to save a company, the DeSoto and Chrysler Airstreams of 1935-36. The Airflow was the full aerodynamic car that was costing Chrysler problems, but again, the Airstream was the watered down version. It says you're faced with rapidly slumping sales after its unconventional Airflow came out. Chrysler Corporation quickly went back to basics. The Airstream and dealers' sighs of relief were the result. Airflow Chryslers and DeSotos, introduced in 34, among the most advanced automobiles of their time. Sales floor, there were unmitigated disaster. DeSoto volume sales shriveled by 1/4 from the already disaster of 1933. So again, Airstream was the watered down version. So for 1937, Chrysler Corporation abandoned all Airstream and Airflow nomenclature gone, although the basic car was the same as the Airstream, and this became the S-3 DeSoto. Let's make our way around the back. And dig this, man, the tube type tires. Here's the inner tube right here that would have been inside of the rubber tire between the steel wheel. You air these puppies up, and the news with these things, they're easily patched with a little, like a bicycle type kit, but again, tubes, not so good for high-speed use. Of course, a modern car with tubes. Trouble with the tube is that they're very difficult to dynamically balance at 80, 90, 100, 110, 120, 130 miles an hour. That tube starts to do weird stuff, you get weird vibrations, but at lower speeds, like this car would have gone, you know, tubeless tires or tube type tires were the rule, and nothing wrong with them. Now this one here, base price on this would have been $880 back in 1937, and this one was $10 more expensive than the standard fastback because it has the trunk back. $10 more for this. The standard car would have just a rounded tail, but this is the trunk back, which added some cargo capacity at the back of the car. And if you think your '63 Stingray is the first split window, think again, actually was a standard feature. And I guess it was more of a styling touch. The reality is a single piece of glass in here would be probably less expensive than this rather ornate stamping. But with that said, it gave the designers room to eliminate the bridge in subsequent years and facelift or tail lift the car. But again, the split window motif right here, not just on Stingray. Let's take a look inside this trunk back and see what we find. DeSoto, okay. Again, here's the metallic beige. As always, the underside of the deck lid is usually the most protected part of the car. There's no engine heat, there's little rust, little moisture, and here it is, the original beige color here. Not a metallic color, but basically a pretty solid one of those DeSoto hubcaps once again. And these clip on, here's that chrome plating that's peeling off, and DeSoto, very stylized Art Deco effect right there. But again, that's a steel cover, no problem. That's gonna be rotted through in another 20 years. Wooden panel here in the trunk. And I gotta say, this is the retractor for the trunk. And this is very similar to what you find on a Corvette, believe it or not. This same device right here is sort of a raised lower effect. And Stingrays, you open the hood and they have the same basic effect as you see right here to hold the trunk up or down. So anyway, so wooden floor here, the spare tire goes underneath, plenty of room right there. And again, the $10 extra trunk back gives you this whole add-on tail. And if you feel underneath, there's actually a seam where this section is welded onto the otherwise conventional tail. So instead of coming up with tooling specific to the trunk back, they actually just band-aided and added on the hump to the otherwise flat tail and charge you $10 more. So again, $880 would have gotten you the DeSoto, and no optional V8s back in the day, but this one did have an optional radio, and once again, the optional spotlight. And this one's running and driving days are over. But again, DeSoto would be gone in 1961, 28 to 61. Some great cars. And again, the DeSoto Airflow now is finally recognized as the groundbreaking car that it is, as is the Chrysler Airflow. But for 1934, DeSoto division was tasked with bearing the brunt of the Airflow styling, which turned out to be a debacle, you call it. Potato. But with that said, for 1937, they put all that Airflow stuff behind them and went out with the S3, and here is an example of that here. Now, these are available as convertibles, 2 doors, 4 doors, no wagons. That hadn't happened yet. Perhaps a Woody or two would have been converted off-site, perhaps, but again, the vast majority were 4-door family cars, just like this, long before the DeSoto Adventurer muscle car that was only 10 years or 20 years down the road, 1957 from this 37. That's the story of DeSoto and how they came back from the brink, and they sold 2 million cars, roughly in total, over half of them after World War II. So again, this whole streamlining thing was not a good thing in the end for DeSoto, but it did lead to a lot of new thinking throughout the universe of automotive design, including Europe. The Saab, etc. All took cues from Chrysler's Airflow. Well, with that said, we hope you like this video, and if you like it, give us a thumbs up, share this with your friends, and be sure to hit the bell so you're aware of the next video, which happens tomorrow morning.